Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Esther Mopariola. A new leader in the familiar face has grown to become the symbol of a new beginning in Zimbabwe, a country once home to Africa's oldest president and longtime dictator, Robert Mugabe. Moving away from the past and embracing the present, Zimbabwe has now inaugurated President Emmerson Mnangagwa for the second time in 9 months after a contested election in July. And so we ask, what are your thoughts on political developments in Zimbabwe as Emmerson Mnangagwa begins a 5-year term as president? You can join the conversation and share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC News NG. We take a report, and Africa Today will continue. Welcome on board.
I, Mbiwzo Mnangagwa.
Emmerson Mnangagwa took the oath as Zimbabwe's president in front of a stadium crowd on Sunday after a divisive election, as U.S. observers of that vote questioned the country's democratic credentials. The Constitutional Court confirmed Mnangagwa as president in a ruling released on Friday, dismissing a challenge by the man he defeated in the June 30th ballot, opposition leader Nelson Chamisa. Thousands of people, some bursting from outside the capital, and foreign leaders gathered at Harare's National Stadium for the swearing-in of Mnangagwa, who just secured the 50% of votes he needed to avoid a runoff against Chamisa. He took the oath before Chief Justice Luke Malaba, who together with 8 other Constitutional Court judges had dismissed Chamisa's petition. The election was touted as a crucial step towards shedding the pariah reputation Zimbabwe had gained under Mnangagwa's predecessor, Robert Mugabe, and securing international donor funding to revive a crippled economy. But hours before Mnangagwa's inauguration, the International Republican Institute and National Democratic Institute said the country lacked a tolerant democratic culture in which political parties were treated equally and citizens allowed to vote freely. The election was marred by procedural lapses and followed by an army crackdown against opposition supporters, undermining promises that Mnangagwa made during campaigning to break with the corruption and mismanagement that became endemic under Mugabe. The crackdown, which left 6 people dead on August the 1st, recalled the heavy-handed security tactics that marked the 37-year rule of Mugabe, who was removed in a coup in November.
Welcome back. Well, before we get into the discussion of the day, let's update you on some of the top news stories around Africa. Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta will meet with President Donald Trump on Monday as the East African nation emerges from electoral turmoil. Ugandan pop star turned government critic Bobi Wine has been freed on bail. The 36-year-old lawmaker has been in detention for treason since August the 14th. Reports from the military say at least 2 police officers have died in fresh violence in western Cameroon, where English-speaking separatists have declared an independent state. Now joining me on Skype to look at Zimbabwe politics, I have Alfonce Mbiwzo, a journalist in Harare, Zimbabwe, and Professor David Moore of the Department of Anthropology and Development Studies, University of Johannesburg, South Africa. Good to have you gentlemen on the program.
Thank you, Wesley.
Right. Now let me begin with you now, Alfonce. Give us the general perception of an average Zimbabwean following the swearing in of Mnangagwa.
You've got two different things. One, where Harare is very subdued and, it's like people are going to a funeral wake instead of celebrating because that's not what they wanted. That's not what they expected from either the election or even the justice system. And then you have where we say, okay, look, we've been there and we knew this was going to happen. Now can we get on with our lives?
And so with all that has been put forward, what is the general expectations?
Look, it's difficult to say what really Zimbabweans expect, but look at it this way. You've got a guy who was basically Mugabe's lieutenant for almost 50 years. And he has been part and parcel of Mugabe's administration for the 37 years he was in power. And whatever happened under Mugabe was also happening under his watch. He has tried to build a reputation for himself, probably with the help of some PR company in London, in South Africa, to sell himself as a reformer. So the question is just how much reforms is he going to allow? And it's not a question of just what he wants, because we know the elements behind him. They are not of the reform accepting kind. But let's see. Then it becomes a question of what exactly are we expecting from this guy? We don't know. We just wait to see. But what we have seen so far is scary.
Now, David Moore, watching it from your own end, what do you think could happen in the next few weeks or so? Because, I mean, in this case, the opposition clearly refused to attend the inauguration, even though they have their cases or they have their grounds why, and they still believe that their mandate was stolen. But Mnangagwa on his own side believes that, you know, they can work together as a common front, as a common party for the good of Zimbabwe as a country. What do you see unplayed in a few weeks or so in Zimbabwe?
Well, I think the MDC is stalling for time. They've said they're going to go to the AU Commission on, I forget exactly what, but that'll be a matter of keeping the record straight, because I think they were unhappy with the Constitutional Court ruling, and they have a lot more things to say that they can put on the record. And they're having a meeting on Wednesday, and it might be a bit too early for them to consider whether or not to go into a coalition government or to remain a loyal opposition or to bring people out on the streets. I personally don't think if I was an MPC supporter, I would go out on the streets because I might get shot. So I think these will be the debates going on. And whatever they do, remember that the MDC alliance is just an alliance. It's not a party. It's a convenient bringing together of various parties, some of which broke off from the MDC in years gone by because they were upset with Morgan Tsvangirai, who, God rest his soul, but he didn't do a very good job of handling the question. And I think on the other side of the fence, you have ZANU-PF, and Alfonce was indicating that there are some people there who don't like reforms. And so there's a big debate going on about the divisions within ZANU-PF between the military, let's put it that way, who actually put Emmerson Mnangagwa in when he was exiled in November last year. So they brought him back in, essentially. So this is a marriage of convenience. I mean, Mnangagwa and his vice president, who's also unconstitutionally the Minister of Defense, Constantino Chiwenga, they've known each other for a long, long time. They've gone through struggles about as long as Alfonce was saying that Mnangagwa was with Mugabe. But it's becoming clear that there are splits. I mean, Reuters has written about it, and people on the street talk about it all the time. And this was most apparent in the events of August the 1st, and Alfonce was witnessing that. The military went in to quell this demonstration. There was some violence in the demonstration. People had been drinking and they were crashing a few cars, but there were no guns. The military came in apparently on the request of the police, but we're not sure, and shot more than 6 people, probably more than 17, and some innocent bystanders at the back. Now, what seems to be there's a huge debate going on. Constantino Chiwenga has said that the MDC actually sent in people with guns so that they would look bad.
Okay, David, we know we're having a bit of a slight challenge hearing you properly, but let's quickly go on a break and get that fixed. When we come back, we'll discuss more on Zimbabwe's politics ahead of the swearing in of Mnangagwa after this break. Stay with us.
Yeah,
But
I can
Alfonce
actually
can
hear
hear me.
you. I can hear you very well.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll get your audio fixed, David. Just give us a minute.
Yeah.
Now, Alfonce,
right.
we needed to sit up a little closer to your camera. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
please get my title correctly
yeah, I
this
think
time.
that's fine now. Okay, just bring it a little bit
Okay.
closer, just an inch. Just an inch close. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, David, could you just take up your camera a little bit forward? Take it up a little. Just
Move it forward.
push it. No, push it back. Push it back.
Move my chair forward.
No, you need to
move
go
my chair
back a
forward?
little. Go back. You need to
Oh,
go
I
back.
need to go back.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So we'll work on your audio. We'll hope to get you clearer when we come back. Welcome back. A few days after Mnangagwa's victory at the polls, Zimbabwe security forces reportedly attacked opposition leaders and opened fire on unarmed protesters. The landmark vote was expected to repair the country's reputation and woo back foreign investments into the country's crippling economy. Well, now, David, before we went on break, we had an issue with your audio. Hope that is corrected now. But now let's look at the MDC. What are their chances in this new government? Do you think perchance they will be working with Mnangagwa?
Well, that's an open question, and I'm not close enough to the people who are making these decisions to preempt their decision. But even back in November, when the coup happened, there was talk about a government of national unity. And you remember that back in 2009 to 2013, there was a government of national unity after a runoff election in which at least 170 MDC supporters and even some ZANU-PF supporters who didn't vote for Mugabe as president were killed and many, many thousands displaced, tortured, raped, and so on. So, and that was a bad experience for the MDC. The MDC kind of got sucked into governing ministries that were social service ministries and also the finance ministry. And there was no finance coming in. It was all going into the Ministry of Mines, Mbiwzo, who is still in this new government. I mean, Alfonce was saying these are the old guys. They haven't changed too much. I think he's quite right. So if the MDC was to join a government now, I think it would be a looser arrangement than a government of national unity. So it would be a coalition which is more flexible, perhaps what you see in Kenya. And even now, Odinga and Uhuru are talking after there was a second election and Odinga didn't run in that election. So we might see something like that. On the other hand, if Nelson Chamisa and Mnangagwa have a meeting, and Nelson Chamisa, even though he said he wasn't going to go to the inauguration and he didn't, he has left an invitation for a meeting open. At his press conference on Saturday, he said, we must talk, and we must talk about how never to have a bad election again. And I think, if the MDC went in as a loyal opposition and they assuaged the fears of the militarists, especially in ZANU-PF, that they weren't puppets of Western imperialism and so on. And we are seeing that discourse arise in some of the state and party-owned news magazines. If they can convince both factions within ZANU-PF that they were going to be a loyal opposition, I think that would be good. Because they have to rebuild very, very carefully.
All right.
The party didn't get any funding, and so on. So I think it's a big decision.
All right. Now, Alfonce, before now, when we talked about expectations of an average Zimbabwean on Mnangagwa's government, you sounded a little bit not too confident about what Mnangagwa has for the people, because you doubted his much touted reforms for his government, and you said you don't think there will be so much that he would allow in Zimbabwe. Why is that, and what do you think he would want to bring this time?
Reforms as in political, economic. Maybe we might have economic, but I'm not so sure about political because this is a clique of people who want to maintain a grip on power at all costs. And they've proved it time and again, even from Robert Mugabe's time. You have the same people. It's the same clique that was backing Robert Mugabe. That's the same clique that's backing Emmerson Mnangagwa now. In terms of political reform, that's not going to happen unless there is sustained pressure from the international community, and particularly the EU and the US, who are insisting on reforms before they can talk of any form of financial relief. Because look, as David pointed out when Shamis was talking about, let's not have a bad election, because this is it. Look, the petition was just an academic exercise because it was never going to happen that the court would overturn Mnangagwa'S to whatever the electoral irregularities. In the previous election in 2013, Morgan Tsvangirai requested for for electoral material, and the electoral court told him no way was there, that's not happening, and he didn't have any material to challenge. In this case here, the court said you should have access to the same material, but look, it's the same court that told the previous guy you can't access it. So what are we talking about here? It was never going to happen. So they need reforms, but how much reforms?
Right.
Because the military element is too much within ZANU-PF, and it's a big problem.
A big problem indeed. But let's hope it doesn't get that worse in Zimbabwe. But David, the country right now, you know, is deeply divided because the opposition doesn't want to accept Mnangagwa's victory, even though he seemed to have won the election, according to the Zimbabwe's Electoral Commission. What do you think can be done to unite this, you know, parties that seem not to accept the overall winner of the elections, so to say?
Well, I'll bet you that there's a lot of backroom bargaining going on. The MPs who have been elected, and it was a big victory for ZANU-PF. Remember, you had 3 elections going on. You had president, parliamentary, and local government. There were well over 66% ZANU-PF MPs elected. And to an extent, that's because the MDC didn't put enough energy into their local constituencies. Sometimes the MDC alliance, and remember, it's an alliance, it's not just one party. They have to come together in January and make and remake that party that Morgan Tsvangirai had as such a strong machine in the mid-2000s. So, you know, the MPs that are there will want good jobs. They're good jobs. And of course, it gives the opposition a base, you know, the media, the speeches, the policy making. I think they will accept. Mnangagwa at his inaugural said, our arms are open, you know, we will welcome you. And Nelson Chamisa says, you have my phone number. In fact, you know my phone number because you listen to every conversation that I'm having. So there's the kind of theatrics and the oppositionist language that the companies all elect. I mean, wherever you are, will have to. They can't just go on being an extra parliamentary opposition.
Right.
They will have to come through.
And Alfonce, do you share the same sentiment as well? What are your thoughts? Do you think perhaps, you know, some magic has to be done for the two parties to come as one?
Actually, I don't think it's magic, but I actually do think sooner rather than later they would have to come together and get on with it. Because look, there's this fatigue already. We have been in a sort of transition since Robert Mugabe left the scene. We are in a situation where we need to know what direction the country is going in. Even in the 9 months Emmerson was in power before the elections, he did enough to suggest he really would try to push some things. Probably not a lot, but because, look, we are following Robert Mugabe, who did nothing for like 30 years. Emmerson, in the short time he has been, we've seen some roads fixed. The road to my own rural home was fixed for the first time in 20 years. You see, so but look, we need a little more than that. We need a lot more than that. It's a country that's been that was tipped to be the breadbasket NGO of Southern Africa, and all of a sudden it's struggling to even match Mozambique in terms of FDI investment. It's a pauper in terms of FDI attraction, but it's got more resources than any country in Africa, save for those with oil. Mention any mineral, Zimbabwe has them, except oil. So that's the thing. It's an issue he needs to deal with. Issue of corruption. It had become endemic under Robert Mugabe. But the problem is, look, I'm a financial journalist, and we know how also he is involved in those things. But the question is, how much is he willing to tackle of those issues? How much is he willing to even turn on his supporters? Because a few of them are involved in these corrupt issues. So look, we might want to give the guy a chance to see how far he can go. But one thing not to forget is that about half the Zimbabweans voted for Nelson Chamisa. Why? Because for the first time they realized they could actually get ZANU-PF out. And believe me, Zimbabweans just want ZANU-PF out of their lives. They are tired of this nonsense.
And so but let's still give let's still wait and see what turns out in Zimbabwe with this new party, with this new president, for the ZANU-PF. Hopefully it will be different from the pact that they've had over the years. But David, with what's on ground in Zimbabwe, what would you say are the key factors that Mnangagwa needs to focus on? In his inauguration, he mentioned creating more jobs, bringing in more foreign investments and the likes, and also creating more hospitals for the country, for the people. But what would you propose should be his core, issues, his core mandate? What should he do for the people now that he is the president of Zimbabwe?
Well, Alfonce is a financial journalist, so he will know about the bizarre system of money in Zimbabwe. Right. But I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. I think the thing that Mnangagwa is really worried about is his Vice President, Chiwenga. And at the inaugural speech, he made a very interesting Freudian slip. Forgot to acknowledge the presence of his Vice President on the stage. And somebody had to remind him, and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot." So I think that indicates that he would kind of like to have Chiwenga off to the side, because that indicates and again, we go back to August the 1st. The army came in after the police at that demonstration. And all of the leaders of the military forces, the commander-in-chief is Mnangagwa, the commander of the armed forces in general is actually Chiwenga, although he's a retired. And the commander, the current commander of the armed forces, Valerio Sabanda, has said, "We don't know who did it." Now this is bizarre. And they've called a commission to investigate who actually did it. So this is the case with either a special unit of the military that are under Chiwenga's control, and Mnangagwa has no control over them, or what? We might find out with commissions. Sometimes commissions don't tell you what you want to know. So that's his first worry, and I think to make an interesting deal, and it's not necessarily a one-party deal.
David, can I add just to what you are saying?
Yes.
Because the report suggests that the unit was actually from the Presidential Guard, which was under Chiwenga's control.
Yes.
And that Chiwenga's reasoning for that was because he was in charge of security. The idea of the police, that's nonsense, because the police don't have the authority to summon the army, and the army don't trust the police in this setting. So that's bullshit. Chiwenga actually did order those soldiers in, because it was a unit under his direct command.
Yeah, you and I may know that, but that is not the public discourse. The public discourse is that he didn't know. Well, or he may have known. I mean, he has two stories. He has the story that he thinks it was MDC people who had guns and were going to blame it on ZANU-PF, so that's why the military came in. But this should come out.
Actually, I was there. They were not. It was people having fun. The police were there. It was like they were singing with, taking pictures with the police until the army came in with guns.
Yes, exactly. I didn't know they were taking the police, but that's very interesting.
Okay, let's have your David. Let's have your concluding part on this, so we can wrap up the show.
Right. Well, that goes back to the coup, because the police were on the wrong side of the coup. But if we look at the economic issues, and maybe Alfonce can pitch in, I'm not sure how much time we have left. But Alfonce could explain to you the bizarre system of money. I mean, there are no reserves. The Reserve Bank, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alfonce, orders banks to buy treasury bonds, but there's nothing really there. They just keep on rolling them over. And so most people are exchanging a sort of cyber currency on their cell phones, and there's about 3 different rates of exchange.
Right.
Even the bond notes, which are supposed to be equivalent to the American dollar, are in short supply because they don't want to create inflation. So most people use this electronic transfer, and it's very, very interesting. I'm sure for a financial journalist.
All right, David, I'm going to stop you right now because we are really out of time. We cannot continue any further on this discussion. We would have continued more, even to have Alfonce's own position on this, several issues he raised. But let me thank you, my guests, Alfonce Mbiwzo and David Moore. Thank you very much for your contributions on Africa Today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, ceremony over, music fades, and all that's left is an urgent need to rebuild a worsening Zimbabwean economy and unite the Southern African nation, largely divided by a vote that many hoped would deliver change. With history made and lessons learned, a new phase of nationhood begins in Zimbabwe, with so much responsibility on President Mnangagwa to restore hope and take the country to greater heights. And that is our package for tonight. But don't forget to join the conversation as usual on Twitter at TVC News NG, and also follow me for updates around Africa at Esther TVC News. Until the next one, I am Esther Mokwariola, and always remember, Africa can only get better.